Maybe you can relate to this. You have finally found your flow state, you're focused, you're moving forward, and you are feeling good. That is until you get interrupted. It could be a small interruption like a text or a phone call, and then you return to work. Or it could be a bigger interruption like needing to adjust your schedule for the day and move things around like a puzzle. Or it could be a major interruption that shifts your plans not just for days, but possibly weeks and maybe even months. That is what we're talking about today is interruptions. And I have been thinking about interruptions a lot because, well, I have had a lot of them lately, both big and small interruptions. And I've been paying close attention to my reactions because, well, frankly, I could be doing better. I'm not in my best place when I'm dealing with a lot of these interruptions. Now, the wonderful thing about noticing your own reactions is that it gives you a chance to pause and ask, is there a better way I could be doing this? And today, I want to specifically share two perspective shifts that have helped me in recent days and weeks, and maybe could help you if you are struggling with interruptions, both big and small. And the first thing I want to do before I share those perspectives is that I want to break down how I'm thinking about interruptions specifically for this episode. When I say interruption, I mean it's external. So someone or something else is the cause of the interruption, not an internal thing where you have maybe delayed or put it off. And I like to think of the three kinds first as one where you are interrupted in your focus. The second is where it's more of an interruption to your schedule, maybe in the next day or two. And then there are these interruptions that affect your routine, your plans over a longer period of time. And if you can imagine you are on a road trip, the first kind would be like bumping up against construction, where they've got the sign that says stop and you need to wait until they let you through. Yes, you pause. Yes, there's a bit of a delay, but eventually you just return on the road that you're already on as planned. The second kind would be more like a detour where you actually have to take an alternate route and you'll get back on the road later. So you're back on that same track, but you had to go off track for a little while before you come back. And I would say the third kind looks like you have to take a new route. You just have to let go of the one you originally planned and you're on a different one. And you're never getting back on that original path. This could be in the same direction, but not always. Sometimes you are actually redirected in a completely different direction. Now, all of us deal with interruptions, but we don't all necessarily handle them the same way. And I think there are two kind of versions. One is sort of your overall disposition, and then the other is more depending on how you are doing. So I do think dispositions are worth calling out, and the fact that there are some people who I just think deal with these better than others. They're like this their whole life. They're just less reactive. They've always kind of been that way. You probably know people that you're just not surprised if they take something in stride most of the time. There are always exceptions. And then there are other people whose dispositions are a little bit more reactive. And I'm guessing you can think of a person right now that you would probably hesitate to interrupt because it's not likely to go well. These are more long lasting traits consistent over a person's life. But you can also have a difference of how you react depending on how you are doing in the moment. And for me, there are a couple of factors that I've noticed. And the first one is just my health, my mental health, physical health, emotional health. When that is lower, I definitely struggle. And then the other part that I notice is I call this the your perceived gap between where you are right now and where you want to be. And this perceived gap can be smaller or it can be really big. And for me, the bigger the gap, the more I might be struggling. And so these two things, my health and also this gap or my sense of the gap, they impact how grounded I feel. When I feel grounded, I am calmer, I'm more peaceful, I can access that logical part of my brain and make sound decisions. When I am not grounded, I feel like I'm not in control. I feel more anxious. I feel disconnected and honestly, just more emotional, more reactive. And I have a much lower capacity for decision making. And during these times, I've got about as much patience as a small child. I'm not proud of it. And I don't really like that version of me, but it is the truth. So even a simple phone call when I'm focused on work, it can send me kind of spiraling. And then those bigger interruptions, the detours or the being on a new route completely, those can sometimes feel paralyzing to me. So what helps? And the first thing you might think, based on what I shared, is that I want to focus on health. So, your mental health, physical health, getting enough sleep, moving your body, removing stressors like taking a break from social media or doom scrolling. Taking care of your health is always important. And at the same time, it can feel difficult when you don't feel grounded or when you feel like you don't have a lot of control. And if that gap between where you are now and where you want to be, if that can actually just feel like it's even bigger during these moments. And so I think it's actually kind of hard to focus on health as the first thing. So instead, for me, at least in my experience, is the first thing I'm going to work on is perspective. And I do this in two different ways. And the first perspective shift is all about addressing that gap, that perceived gap of where I am now and where I want to be, because it is about perception. It's not necessarily based in reality. And when I feel like there's a really big gap and I feel like I don't have control and I'm overwhelmed, I try to close that, asking questions like, okay, what is realistic for me right now in this moment? Right sizing expectations, letting go of things that are just unrealistic at this point in time, and just focusing on the small actions that I can take. So, what would help me right now? What are the small things? What can I say no to? And what boundaries can I protect? When I answer those questions and I do it honestly, and that might mean making a difficult decision, the gap starts to shrink and it feels more manageable. I feel like, okay, I can cross this. I can get to where I need to be right now. And these small shifts, they help me to handle those interruptions a little bit better. But there is one other perspective shift that I've really started to lean into this year since I learned it earlier in the year. And this second perspective shift is all about how we define interruptions as a whole. And I've learned that from the author Oliver Burkeman. So he wrote the book 4,000 Weeks and Meditations for Mortals. I'm a really big fan of his work because it is all about shifting your perspective about productivity and time management. And in Meditations for Mortals, he suggests that we start to think about interruptions not as something that we need to resist, but as life happening. Life is made up of unexpected moments and interruptions. And if you have bought into this ideal of productivity that you need to avoid all interruptions at all costs, this will change how you define an interruption, of what is an interruption. More things in your life will be seen as an interruption, but this will also change how you react to them. You'll see every interruption as a negative thing, and this can lead to resentment. At least I know that's my experience. If it's negative, I resent that I'm being interrupted at all. So instead, Berkman invites us to embrace these moments, to be present while they're happening, and just notice that this is part of life. To be clear, this does not mean you shouldn't have boundaries and that you shouldn't take any steps to support your attention. Taking small steps like going into do not disturb mode or letting the people around you know that you are doing focused work right now. These are things that will help you, and you can absolutely still do them. But if we start to shift how we think about interruptions and the fact that they are a part of life, it can help to sort of loosen our grip a little bit and to be more open to these moments and situations as they happen. I also like to think of a metaphor that's used in Buddhist teaching about being mad at the rain, because you cannot control the weather, but you could put on a raincoat. You could bring an umbrella. In other words, you get to choose how you react, but you're wasting your energy being mad at the rain. In the same way, we cannot control every kind of interruption that will come up, but we can control how we respond. And I know I respond better when I shift that perspective, when I adjust my expectations and remind myself that interruptions are not getting in the way of living life. They are part of living life. Which brings me to my current momentum experiment, which is all about building a consistent strength routine. Friends, it's not going well. Since sharing about this a few weeks ago, I have had 2 different injuries, and my plans for workouts while traveling just did not happen. I am actually returning to my physical therapist tomorrow to address the current injury because this is not something I think is gonna go away on its own, but it is a work in progress. I am really actively trying to embrace the concept of act, observe what happens, reflect on what happens, and then act differently, try something new. And this is all about paying attention when I do try something and then adjust and try again. And the observation that I am making lately is that I really don't have a contingency plan for injuries. But given that I know I am hypermobile and I'm prone to injury, I should have backup plans. For example, if I have a lower body injury, can I safely do an upper body workout instead? And also, what does that look like? Because then, of course, I don't want to make anything worse. So when it's time to work out and I'm not clear what I should do or what I can do, and I'm already frustrated because I'm injured, I tend to just shut down and I just kind of skip it altogether. So, when it comes to this current experiment, my next step is to work with my physical therapist, but also come up with backup plans and maybe work with her on those. The other way to think of these are what people call if then plans. So, if I've got this injury, I'm going to do this instead. So that when it's time, when I look at my schedule and I have planned to work out, if something has sort of derailed me a little bit, I know what I can actually do. I have clarity on my options so that I'm more likely to do it. That's at least what I'm going to try. So that is sort of the next thing that I am working on. But I also know, and this I'll talk about this in a different episode, is that I know my history of injuries and the start stop has really affected my mindset. And it has kind of created some fear in working out and getting injured. And so that's another thing I'm working on. And I'll share about that separately in a different one because it's its whole own topic, but it's a real thing that I don't want to ignore. So as I'm trying these things, I'm also paying attention not just to practical issues like not knowing what to do when I'm injured, but also paying attention to what I'm saying to myself. What are some of these discomforts and hesitations that are arising? Because they seem to be arising. And when it comes to interruptions, having those backup plans is also a really good option of if I am not at home or if I'm in another situation, what are my possibilities? All of that can definitely help with handling when you have to maneuver, when you have to detour, and all of that. So, hopefully, these perspective shifts that I've shared today about interruptions could potentially help you if you're having negative reactions or you're finding interruptions difficult. Obviously, keep your boundaries, but is there maybe a different perspective you can take when both small and big interruptions come into play? Because they do happen. This is life. And it may impact your momentum, but when we have those good perspectives, it allows us to kind of get back on track or pick a new track so that we can keep moving forward.